The web has 3 languages: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Which of those languages have an if statement? You're probably a normal person and saying, yeah, JavaScript does and the rest don't. Well, that just changed. CSS now has an if function. Yes, really. Okay, HTML technically kind of does, but we're not getting into semantics. This is a literal, traditional if statement in CSS that provides a ton of really nice composability and complex stuff that previously you'd have to be applying and unapplying classes to things for. This is going to change so much stuff. I'm genuinely really, really excited for it. And I can't wait to dive in. But as you guys know, nobody in the CSS world is paying me. In fact, I spend a lot of money on nice CSS. So quick word from today's sponsor to cover the bills, and then we'll dive right in. We're in the era of AI slop. It's harder than ever to find a good source for anything, much less learning a new solution or technology. Imagine spending hours of your time going through a tutorial by somebody who's never been employed and doesn't actually understand the tech, and is just regurgitating ChatGPT to you. That's sadly the reality of most course solutions. They aren't made by industry experts. Unless you check out today's sponsor, Frontend Masters. Frontend Masters is paying other people to write their courses, but it's not some random people who don't know how to code. It's industry experts, people you've probably seen around here because they're building awesome stuff, like Lydia right there on the homepage. Or if we look through the courses, you'll see some names. Okay, to be fair, Primogen might not be the best developer, but supposedly he worked at Hulu or something. But all these other people are legends, like Brian Holt, Richard, who built a text editor from scratch in Rust. Like, who else is going to tell you about compilers in C better than that? Scott Moss from Netflix, or Katie, one of the most legendary React Native devs I know. It's always fun scrolling through this list because it's a bunch of people that I'm friends with that I haven't chatted with in a while, including Kevin Powell, one of the industry leads in CSS. He's corrected so many things I've been wrong about in the past. Love that dude. Honestly, I should probably take this one. These guys even have Google employees making courses about Angular. If you are ending up at a company using Angular and you're not familiar, that's probably one of the best places to get started and modernize with your Angular stack. Subscribers get access to over 200 of these courses made by dozens of industry experts. They're really good, and for the price you're paying, it's kind of insane, especially if you have an education budget at your job, and if you don't, ask your boss, you can probably get one. It's basically free for you. It's no money for the company, and you'll just level up a ton as a developer. The team seats are also really cheap, so if you're a manager that wants to get your team onboarded or move in a bit faster, this is one of those things you should consider spending the money on. If you use my link, you'll get 25% off. So check them out today at soidev.link/masters. CSS conditionals with the new if function. As always, these really fun new CSS things are being written and shown to me by Una. She's incredible, really talented dev over at Google. She even took the time to put together a little YouTube video. And I figured, what better way to start than to watch this together and use it as our base for reference. Also, my chat is freaking out over this. Specifically, Igor from Axiom is so hyped. The style people are so excited about this.
So I've been playing with the new CSS if function, which is pretty cool that we have this capability in CSS now. And this is landing in Chrome 137. So with if, you can essentially use custom property values and style queries to write logical styles based on custom property values. So the classic example is light and dark, but I wanted to take that a step further and really thought about how would I actually use this in a UI. If I'm building something, I'm probably using React or some other kind of library where in the DOM, I'm structuring things using props. And so I wanted to do an example here where I have these different cards with data status on them. So each of these has a status: pending, complete, or inactive. So I have 3 different statuses. And then I'm using those data attributes to convert this data into CSS. And the way that I'm doing that is using custom properties. And I'm using the new attribute function where I can actually cast these values using a type. So I'm setting this status custom property using adder. I'm pulling in the data status, and then I'm setting that to a custom identifier type value.
Okay, I see where this is going. I had a feeling, but the big win here is going to be that you can configure which values are being applied without having to change the class names. It's going to make things like class names, CLSX, and all of that stuff for us Tailwind users. It's going to make life much better. Let's finish this video quick, and then I'll dive into all the nitty-gritty details about all the cool shit that we can do with it.
So now for each of these cards, we have a status custom property that is a custom identifier based on the data status that's inside of the DOM. Now that we have this status, we can actually set some styles. So I'm setting border color, background color, and grid column based on this status custom property. So first I have this if statement inside of the value for border color. So I can say if, then I'm using a style query. If the style query, that's status, is pending, so checking for this custom.
Yeah, so this is more, I know it's called if, but this is almost a switch statement, the way that the syntax works, which is really, really cool. Obviously, syntax is weird because CSS syntax has never been good. You get the idea, though.
Same thing for the background color. If the status is pending, light blue background. If it's complete, light green, else light gray. Then finally, I'm setting the grid column. So here, if it is pending, put it in the first column. If it's complete, put in the second column, else put in the third column.
That's actually a really clever thing I hadn't thought of, assigning which column something goes into based on a value. That's actually really, really cool.
So this used to not be accessible. Like doing something like this where I'm visually changing the DOM order used to not be accessible. And the reason why is because you have your DOM structure, right? So we have the DOM tree with all these items, and now they're out of order because I can move this to inactive, for example, and it's shifted over into that last column. So now we have an imbalance with our styles, visual styles, and what the DOM is showing us. So if you're using a screen reader, it doesn't align. But now there's a new property called reading flow, and reading flow just landed in Chrome today. There's an article out about it by Dai Zhang and Rachel Andrew that talks all about reading flow. And what this essentially does is it fixes that issue where you have a visual order mismatch with the source order of the DOM tree. So we can now correct for this in CSS. And what I'm doing there is I'm setting the reading flow right here to grid columns. So now a screen reader is going to read the columns of this in order, and that's the intended order that I want it to be read in.
Reading flow part in particular, I didn't even think of, and that's dope. I try to think about these accessibility things, but it's easy to miss them. By the way, if you enjoy a video, hitting the like button is free, and half of y'all haven't subbed, so sub to Una, and if you haven't subbed to me, it doesn't hurt. Maybe give it a shot if you haven't given it one yet. Anyways, thank you, as always, for making such a good resource. So we just put a lot of time trying to get this working on a custom issue tracking demo and hit a bunch of weird snags because it's a new thing, not too surprising. But this code, as far as we know, should be working and isn't. That is fine because Naman put together a much more compelling demo for us. Here you see this hello button that on hover changes colors, and when clicked also changes to colors. But more importantly, when we resize the window, it changes colors too. So let's see how this works. We have some custom properties defined, like hover, focus visible, and active. And these custom properties have syntax, number, initial 0, inherit false, just properties we can now apply to random things. All properties on the site have default set for these. Hover set to initial, focus visible set to initial, and actives also set to initial. And then we, on hover, for any element, --hover is 1. On focus visible, --focus visible is 1. And active, what we're doing is we're making these properties accessible on all elements, so that instead of having to do class name : hover, we can now access the property to see if hovering is happening or not. So from here, we have a function that was defined. Mobile first, small, medium is var small, large is var mg, XL is var large. Does it been MD? Yeah. Found a typo in your demo. Regardless, you get the idea here. Result for this function with mobile first is that we always return var small by default, but if you hit certain minimum widths, we then send larger variables. Cool. So this is how we get a value for what size to use. All makes sense. And then hover focus active again is a function, but now we're starting to use ifs. If the style is active, then we set the variable to be A. If it is focus, we set it to F, and if it's hover, we set it to H. Otherwise, we just set it to base. Here's the interesting parts. Button, background. If style is active, set it to be roughly white, or is that right? Now it's the gray. And if hover, we set it to black. And if focus visible, we set it to a different color as well. Now we have a pretty simple way to determine the background color of this button using properties that are predefined here as globals. So this sets it so that these properties exist on every element on the page. And now wherever we feel like, we can just write this really simple if check to determine which properties are assigned. Let's compare this to the old way quick. We'll set this background color to be the default. And now it doesn't change when we do anything. Expected. We can change it so on hover, we set the background color to be the right thing. Now I've restored the hover behavior. Now we can restore active behavior. Cool. Really easy, simple to understand. We get it. There is an issue here that I don't like. As somebody who puts a lot of time into structuring these systems, the ordering here sucks. The fact that the last option is the one that applies most aggressively sucks. If I swap these and I put hover at the bottom and active there, now when I'm clicking, nothing happens. That's not intuitive. That makes life harder when you're building really big systems with lots of classes scattered all around them. And now it's possible for somebody to add a custom class somewhere down the line that comes in earlier or later and break everything. The magic of this new way of doing it is that it's all defined in the same class, and the order is it escapes when the thing that you put here is true. So it's very intuitive that if active, we do that. If not, we check the next thing. If focus visible, we do that. If not, we check the next thing. If hover, we do that. If not, we check the next thing. If else, okay, we're at the end. Do that instead. That is awesome. It makes it way clearer what will apply when. We won't have to spend all our time in the dev tools figuring out why this color isn't applying. Oh, it turns out it has an old class name on it where it's not supposed to. This is great. My hot take with this is that if Google's goal is to make it so that frameworks aren't as necessary in the browser, this is one of the best steps they can take. This type of change makes it so that the browser primitives are way more composable and way more useful and way more, in my opinion, scalable, because these types of behaviors and these types of definitions being able to live here is really good. It's also really nice because it works as an inline style, which is even cooler. You don't need to go define the CSS this way. You don't have to worry about how inline styles conflict with the styles in your CSS file. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff. It just kind of works because it's just CSS. No more chaos with class names, Tailwind merge, and all that stuff. It just does what it's supposed to. And if it only lets you apply based on properties, it would already be really cool. But as mentioned before, we can go so much further with it. You could use this to check if something supports a different color scheme. So if it doesn't support OKLCH, then it could apply a traditional hex color instead. If you have a pointer, as in you have a mouse cursor on your device, because that's a media attribute, then we can make a button smaller than if you're on a touchscreen. That's really, really cool and useful, being able to define that there, instead of having different classes for all these different properties. Previously, this is what you'd have to write for that, and that sucks. You'd have to do a @media wrapper and then redefine the thing underneath. In this control flow, it just fucking sucks. And if you were to flip this, if you were to accidentally put the @media wrapper on top, it breaks. I bet this would make the Minecraft in CSS hilariously easier too, which would be super cool to see. Honestly, the more I think about the grid column example that Una did, the more I'm in love with it because it really showcases the type of thing that you wouldn't want to define multiple classes for. Imagine if you had to define different classes for all of the different states that a card could be in that do that assignment, that put it in the different column. If we had card : data status attribute is pending, then grid column is 1. You'd have to define card 4 times, once for the shared styles, and then 3 more times for all of the if checks that you have to do instead. That's not good, and this change makes it actually quite pleasant. So what we have to do instead, we set the default class with just border. We then set the data status pending version, which has different properties. We then set the complete version with different properties. We then set when not data status or the data status isn't one of these, then we have our fallback to the final column. That is not fun or clean. And now imagine something slightly different. Like maybe in some cases you want to have an override where if this other property is more important, like it doesn't matter if it's completed or not, if it's overdue, you still want to highlight the color in red, you're screwed. And that's where this is going to get really, really magical. Imagine if we're not checking the same property for each of these. If we have status, but we also have overdue as a separate attribute. That's like data overdue type custom ident. And if it's overdue, we always want the border color to be red. This is so cool that we can mix and match different properties in the same if statement. But maybe if it's complete, we don't want to do that. We only want to show it overdue if it isn't complete. So now we can change that. We just change overdue to be after because the order matters. If I change this to pending, overdue true. Okay, that should have worked, shouldn't it? Oh, it's because I have all these. It's because I have all these. That's why. I'm stupid. I delete all those. Okay, I made a mistake. I had some old code left over. That's why that was broken. It's fixed now. It works how I would expect. You get the idea. Now we can pick for different things where we do or don't want the property to matter. I can comment that out, and now it's red if it's overdue, but if we change that same element to be completed, it will no longer be red because we prioritize completion to overdue. Yeah, we move to complete, and the red border is gone because we check for status complete first, then we check for overdue, then we check for status pending. That's so good. And different properties can check for different things in different orders depending on what the needs of the component are. That's why this is magical. We're not trying to force CSS into the right shape for our stuff. We're not defining a bunch of weird conditions in JavaScript and applying different classes accordingly. We're not redefining the same class in 100 places in order to try and apply the right thing at the right time. People in chat are saying that this is helping it click for them and that suddenly they would actually want to write CSS again. I agree. This is really, really cool. I'm hyped. The idea of mixing and matching what you are checking against as you assign specific properties based on attributes, based on user device characteristics, based on hover behaviors, based on all these different things, that is really, really compelling to me. This also means that inline styles just got way cooler too. So for those of you like me who think inline styles got more shit than they deserved, our time is now. Things are going to get really fun really fast, and I am personally quite excited for it. The future of CSS has never felt brighter, and I am really hyped on this now. Curious what you guys think, though. Are if statements overrated for styles, or is this actually compelling to you? I know that this is useful to me, but I'm probably going to stick with Tailwind, at least for the time being. My team and my AI agents are really good at it, but I'm curious how you feel. Let me know in the comments. And until next time, peace nerds.